It's time to get the story behind the story. Interviews with newsmakers, news breakers, and Vermonters making a difference. WCAX presents 802 News with Mark Johnson. Here's Mark.
The city of Burlington is facing some serious challenges. A group of local residents says it's time to organize and confront them head on. In this edition of 802 News, sponsored by Red Hen Baking Company, Board Chair Michelle Ash and Board Member former Mayor Peter Clavel discuss Building Burlington's Future, a grassroots group advocating for an affordable, safe, and vibrant Queen City. First this. At Red Hen Baking Company, they believe pure, uncomplicated ingredients in the hands of skilled artisans are the building blocks for great food. They're dedicated to creating the best food from the best ingredients. You'll find an ever-changing lineup of delicious pastries, sandwiches, and soups at their beautiful cafe off Route 2 in Middlesex, just off I-89. Their breads are also available in many other locations. Led by owners Randy George and Eliza Kane, Red Hen Baking Company has been on the leading edge of the local food movement since 1999. In the 80s, Burlington was considered the most livable city in America. Today we have issues of open drug use, EMTs who are burned out, graffiti, property crime. How would you describe the state of Burlington today?
I think Burlington continues to be a great city and one of the most livable cities in the country. Are we facing challenges? Absolutely. Some of the challenges are more pronounced in Burlington as you look at Burlington and compare it to other cities. But many of the challenges that we're experiencing are issues that cities large and small across this country are facing.
Michelle, you want to take a crack at that?
Sure. Well, I definitely agree with Peter. I've lived here for 30 years. I don't plan on going anywhere. What I'll add to what Peter said is the interest in getting Burlington back on track and fostering that sense of community and livable city, the interest with Burlington residents and the actions taken, I think, are testament to the strength of our community despite all the challenges we're having.
Why is your group needed then?
It's harnessing that energy that's the issue. Our group is needed. I think Peter and I probably have both been involved in many ad hoc groups. I know I have. There's been groups saying, let's get together and talk about public safety. Let's get together and figure out how to create a more viable downtown. And those groups are volunteers, and I've been part of them where we've met weekly, and then nothing ever happens. So this group, Building Burlington's Future, really came out of that frustration of there being a lot of energy, but nowhere to harness it.
I think the health and well-being of cities, of communities, is dependent upon the engagement of its citizens. And Building Burlington's Future is a systematic way, a strategy to engage citizens on an ongoing basis. As I listen to the citizens of Burlington, some bemoaning conditions in the city, others saying, what can we do? I saw Building Burlington's Future as an opportunity to respond. This is what you can do. You can get involved in coming forth with good ideas and advocating for good public policy to make Burlington better and to address the issues and the challenges that Burlington is faced with today.
When you say people are bemoaning the situation, are they wrong?
No, they're not wrong. I think sometimes for some it's a narrow perspective. I think you need to look at what's going on around this country, around this planet, in terms of the challenges cities are facing. But I also understand that Burlington is facing some unique challenges. I walk downtown on a regular basis, at least a couple times a week, and you cannot walk down the streets of Burlington or walk through City Hall City Hall Park without saying, this is not feeling right. There are issues that we need to address. There are people that are struggling with mental health issues, with drug addiction, with homelessness that need support to move to a better place.
What happened?
It's not easy to respond to that question succinctly, but I think what we're experiencing in Burlington now did not happen overnight. It's happened over a period of years. Some of it is the result of COVID, and the COVID pandemic really shook things up in cities, really changed the dynamics of cities. The flight of office workers from city centers in Burlington and elsewhere is a huge issue. The diminishment of brick and mortar retail and folks doing all their shopping on Amazon has had a huge impact on our cities. So this is some of the problems, but I also think that issues of affordability and making owning or renting a home out of reach for more people is a serious problem. I think also there are some huge challenges that we face that nobody's accepting responsibility for. And I see the federal government and the state government really turning its back on some of the fundamental issues and needs of our citizens. I'm thinking of drug addiction and mental health and homelessness. And those issues get pushed down to the local level. And once they're at the local level, whether you're responsible for them or not, you own them. And they're very evident at the local level.
How would you respond to that same question? What happened?
I'll just emphasize the drug addiction piece, because what I'm seeing right now is Burlington has always taken care of folks that are unhoused. We've have a track record of being a compassionate city that takes care of people. We've exceeded the capacity to do that. In my conversations with nonprofits that serve that population, they're beyond capacity. But then when you add in the drug addiction and the crime that as a result of the drug addiction, I think that's something that we really need to address. And what I have been saying to folks is, I don't like homelessness and crime linked together. It's not a crime to be homeless, but we do have rules but we as a collective have said this is how we will conduct ourselves. And I think to protect everybody, including the unhoused and the children and the families and the businesses, we need to enforce the laws that we as a society have agreed are ways to conduct ourselves.
When people say they don't feel safe going downtown, are they wrong?
Well, you're talking to somebody. I go downtown almost every day. I'm not, at 59, I'm not down there when the bars let out, so I can't speak to that. But I think Burlington is safe. I think Burlington can feel unsafe because of the activity that you witness when you're walking around. You walk through City Hall Park and you see behaviors that are just that are breaking the law, quite frankly, and that doesn't feel safe.
When people say they don't feel safe, they're not wrong. That's the way they feel. One of the challenges is to create an environment where people are not feeling unsafe, and an environment where everybody respects others in terms of your behavior. And if you misbehave or create problems for others, whether it's just disorderly conduct or retail theft, you're held accountable.
Some people point to local government, county government as being part of the problem too. State's attorney comes under a lot of criticism for not prosecuting some of the crimes you just outlined.
Yeah.
So why can't government deal with this? Why does a group like yours, a group of citizens, have to be formed? This traditionally is what government did.
Yeah. And there certainly is a very substantial role for government to play. And I think one of the reasons that this group was created was to support government when they're doing the right thing, to advocate for good public policies and to hold government accountable.
What's government not doing right?
Well, one of the things that they're not doing, I think one of the greatest mistakes in my public life in Burlington was the decision to dramatically reduce the size of our police department. And we continue to pay for that decision today. And back then when that decision was made, I, with others, was arguing this is a bad decision and there are going to be negative consequences. And it's going to be still years before we recover from that decision. So I think one of the things that citizens need to do is recognize that, yes, there is need for police reform. Yes, our police department and police officers need to be held accountable. But yes, there is a very important and fundamental role that the police play ensuring a civil society and law and order in our community.
Well, most communities in Vermont right now seem to be looking for police officers. If I were a police officer, why would I want to work in Burlington when I could work somewhere else?
I think that those that enter the policing as a career, I think that many are looking for challenge and are looking for an interesting place to be a police officer rather than simply cruising the back roads of a rural community. So if you want action, Burlington's a good place to be a police officer. And I think some of the decisions that have been made to augment the police presence, the uniformed armed police officer, with social workers and mental health experts is an excellent thing to do. And I applaud the city for taking those steps, but I also believe that we need to staff up our police department. And the same is true of the state's attorney's office. They are understaffed. During COVID, there was a huge backlog of crimes that our criminal justice system simply did not have the resources to address, and they're still dealing with that backlog.
Is it just more staffing needed? Is it a different approach that's needed?
I think there are some systematic changes that need to occur, and I think that Burlington is attempting to introduce some of those changes through some of the new programs that they're introducing, whether it's the situational table or some of the restorative justice practices. I think that those are steps in the right direction. But there also need to be changes in laws which hold people accountable for the behavior. And those that are responsible in some cases for dozens of infractions of the law, they're just demanding a huge portion of the public resources available in terms of law enforcement. You could identify 10 people in Burlington that are probably responsible for 40% of the calls to the police department. That's a situation that needs to be dealt with.
Michelle, you were nodding your head when Peter was talking about cutting the police force.
I was actually on the police commission when that was happening, and also I'll just add a couple of other points. One is when the idea about introducing more public health officers and counselors to the police department, the police were really excited about that. That's not, they never wanted to go into homes and deal with folks that are, once the situation was deemed not dangerous, to then deal with somebody who's in crisis that's not the place for a police officer. So I think the introduction of these community safety officers was excellent for the police department. I know that the police officers get really frustrated when they keep arresting the same person who's back on the street. So I think we do need to change that. And I think we would see the sense of safety and that feeling of safety increase if just a handful of people were held accountable and taken off the streets. The other piece that I want to add is The most vulnerable we're really talking about are also the people unhoused. We get to go home and lock our doors at night, but you have folks that are committing these crimes. Those folks that are not housed are certainly susceptible to those crimes. I think many of us have witnessed that. I've witnessed it in City Hall Park. And then you have the kids. You have the King Street Youth Centers and Boys and Girls Club. I mean, those kids are at risk when we let people that we know are committing the crimes out.
And it isn't just the police. It's also the EMT workers who are narcaning the same person twice in the same shift. I mean, there seems to be a real danger here that this could snowball and get worse. Fair to say?
That's fair. There's no question. That's fair. And, I think some very significant actions are required. And I think the city is in the process of taking those actions. The change that's necessary doesn't happen overnight. It requires resources, it requires training, and also requires a different mindset in terms of the behavior that's going to be tolerated in this community.
Let's talk about your group. What specific steps can your group do to improve the situation?
The model that we have for building Burlington's future was really taking a page out of the Let's Grow Kids playbook, where you really marry advocacy and public policy. How we can be helpful is working with our lawmakers to help influence policy, smart, outcomes-based, results-oriented policy. But then the next step in that is informing the Burlington residents, because so often people don't hear about a resolution that was passed or not passed until after the city council meeting. So actually informing folks before that, so they have an opportunity to weigh in and contact their city councilors to give their voice when it matters. And it matters the week before city council. It matters before that meeting. So that's, I think, the real power, is informing, educating voters, a call to action, and having influence in helping to create smart policy.
All right, give me a specific example or two.
Well, we've only been in existence for 8 weeks. So I can't give you an example of what we have done. I can give you an example of something that I think would be impactful, sort of, I like to call it low-hanging fruit. And that is just even the fees that are charged now. The fees were increased to do an event on the waterfront. And when events happen on the waterfront, that brings in a lot of good energy to the city, commerce, our gross receipts it impacts, which of course we can't solve the problems that Peter outlined without money. So that seems like it's a win-win. So putting a resolution forward saying, let's lower the fees to a reasonable amount to attract more events back to the waterfront. Higher Ground moved their events to Shelburne as a result of the fees on the waterfront. That's not intelligent long-term policy, in my opinion.
And Nectar's just closed this week.
Yeah. I was there 50 years ago when they opened. And I think it's an incredible loss to the community that Nectar's has closed. And I think the future of Burlington, I've been around long enough, 44 years in local government, when there was a time when we worked real hard to make certain that Burlington had its piece of the pie in terms of retail activity. And that's less important today. I mean, all those years we struggled to bring an anchor department store into downtown Burlington. There will not be another anchor department store in downtown Burlington. But there will be people living in downtown Burlington. Thousands of more people will be living in downtown Burlington. I think the future of Burlington is to be a place where you come for an experience. And the experience might be to enjoy an arts event, or to experience culture, or to go to the library, or go to a unique restaurant, or wine bar, or bookstore. And I think we need to embrace a strategy which makes Burlington a place where you come for that experience. I mean, we have so much going for the city. And so, yes, we have some challenges, but we also have a very strong foundation. I mean, the Church Street Marketplace, anybody who was down there this past weekend for the block party the Fools.
Festival of Fools.
Festival of Fools. It was magical. And anybody who comes to downtown Burlington and says, oh, my God, there's a lake 3 blocks away. You know, very few cities have this. A pedestrian mall that works, a lake which is within a few blocks away, and a new hotels opening in downtown Burlington. I mean, when I started working for the city, there was 1 hotel. How many hotels now in downtown Burlington? There's 4 or 5, another one opening this month. You know, so people are going to come to downtown Burlington, and we just need to make certain that we're there to create a welcoming environment, not only for visitors, but for our citizens. And when I was mayor, people would say, you know, what do we need to do to bring tourists here? I said, let's not think about the tourists. Let's think about people that live in Burlington. If this is a place that they're going to experience and enjoy, the tourists will have the same experience and will enjoy it. So I think Burlington, again, has huge assets. And sometimes rather than simply talking about the problems that we have downtown, we need to look at the assets that we have that include educational institutions, a wonderful medical establishment, and just build on those assets.
You know, I don't think anybody would argue with that. On the other hand, you know, I've lived in this city for a long time too. And I know an awful lot of people that say, yeah, you know, I just don't want to bother going downtown anymore. Yeah. That is just not something that you would hear in the past. And, you know, maybe it is a perception problem. Maybe you're right that a lot of other cities in America are experiencing the same problem. But I think a lot of people don't care about that. They care about right. Burlington. You know, and you've got this construction project, which probably was a big contributor to Nectar's closing. Right. Not to be critical, but, you know, you can talk about all these problems, but that doesn't change the fact that it's really difficult to get from Maple Street down to Battery Street.
Yeah, and the experience, we need to change both the experience that people have when they come to downtown Burlington, but also the perception. And you're right, there's been a combination of things that have been occurring, including construction activity, but I think that's going to serve this community and the people that live and visit here well. But yes, it's been painful along the way. But we're going to have an infrastructure that will allow us to accommodate additional growth, that will be environmentally friendly and keep stuff out of the lake that doesn't belong there, that will be more friendly to bicyclists and pedestrians while also accommodating the automobile. There's going to be more people living downtown. There's a lot of good stuff happening. But as it happens, there has been pain. And I certainly acknowledge that pain. I mean, one of the things that we've done over the years is to create a tax base which allows the city to enjoy some of the economic benefits that occur when people come downtown and they're eating and drinking and staying in hotels. As a result of changes that have been made in tax policy over the years, the city's getting a piece of that action. In terms of the sales tax, the city's getting a piece of that action. And I think that to the extent that there are people downtown who are enjoying the experience, are moving around, are like this past weekend, enjoying an arts festival, that's going to make Burlington more comfortable, and it's going to make Burlington feel safer for everybody.
So this is putting the cart before the horse a little bit, but one of the things we're working on is creating a dashboard to monitor the progress the city is or isn't making. Now, it's not totally put together, but over the next few weeks, probably mid-September, we're going to have a dashboard that's measuring the things that are indicators of a healthy city. One of those things just is gross receipts. What was it a year, 2 years ago? What is it today? And now let's monitor that. But there's going to be other, indicators in housing and affordability, indicators in community health and safety, and economic indicators that we're going to follow, and it'll be accurate data to say, Is the city actually improving or isn't it? And if it isn't, then what can we do to improve those indicators?
Again, I think one of the issues is you can measure all the numbers you want, and then you have a shooting outside a red square that gets the attention, and that's what people remember, not the details of what the gross receipt stacks are.
Well, there will be indicators as far as safety too, but I agree with you, Mark. We absolutely need to say we are not going to tolerate the criminal behavior that's going on in our city. Somewhere along the line, and we're not the only city saying this, somewhere along the line, in an act of sort of being compassionate, we've decided to let some things slide, in my opinion, and we've seen that this doesn't work. It doesn't work for as Peter said, the residents that live here, the families. We don't want young families moving out of Burlington because it's not safe for them to raise their children. We don't want that. So if we don't want that, we've got to take measures to improve that.
Okay.
And that's a good example, though, the shooting in Red Square. I mean, one of the things the citizens of Burlington have said, that there's no simple solution here, but there's a number of steps that can be taken. And one of those steps is to say you cannot take a firearm into a bar. And what happens? It requires a charter change. The people overwhelmingly vote for it, and then it gets to Montpelier, and the state legislature or governor in their infinite wisdom say, we don't think that's a good idea. Well, then Building Burlington's Future can step up and say, you need to listen to us, and we can advocate for the adoption of that policy that has been supported and embraced by the citizens of Burlington, and we also can advocate for other steps that will deal with the issue of guns in our community.
How do you specifically advocate for that?
I think you advocate by grassroots organizing and making certain that politicians are hearing from their citizens and making certain that citizens are speaking to their politicians. I mean, as a recovering politician, you listen to your voters, and I think that's one of the things that we can do is amplify the voice of the citizens.
Okay, but my recollection is the city of Burlington has voted twice on that issue.
Right.
Sent it down to Montpelier. Phil Scott says, I'm not going to sign it. You could have all the phone calls in you want to him. What difference is it going to make?
I think ultimately it's going to make difference. Even Phil Scott is not immune to the opinion of the folks that elect him to office.
All right. Well, he's already.
Nor are the legislators. And if Phil Scott was to veto a piece of legislation, that can be overridden. But the legislators, not only from Burlington but from across the state, need to hear from folks. And we've had this discussion, but I think Building Burlington's Future needs to recognize it's not only advocating for local actions, political actions, but it's also advocating for actions at the state level.
How much money has the organization raised? How much is it raised, and how much has been pledged to it?
We have a 5-year plan right now. We're planning for a 5-year stint. And in that 5 years, we plan to spend anywhere from $1.5 to $2 million, and we've raised about 1.3 pledged. We don't have that.
What are you going to spend your money on?
Really advocacy and building our database and basically educating folks. It takes paid staff. We have a full-time executive director, Sam Donnelly. We have a director of operations, and we have a firm doing communications for us. That's when we talked about before, rather than just have a group of volunteers that don't have any resources and all have lives and it's not their full-time venture. This is really creating that full-time paid positions to accomplish our goals.
You've said, my recollection is you've said this group is not political in nature, and I don't ask this question from a political standpoint as much as an observation. What kind of job do you think the mayor is doing on these issues? She ran on these issues of public safety, making a more vibrant downtown. How well is that going?
Well, she's only been in office a short time, and she didn't create the problems. They were here when she came into office. So I think we need to give her another 6 months or so. She has some ideas about ways to handle petty crimes and things like that. So how is she doing? I think it's too soon to really tell.
How would you respond to that, former mayor? Maybe we should blame you for the problems.
You could do that. Sure.
And and I understand what Michelle's saying. Sure, a year is too short a period of time, but you've lived in the political world. People want results yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, the job of being mayor is much more challenging and much more complicated today than it was 20 years ago when I was mayor. Some of the issues that we talked about today is just the lack of affordable housing. That was not such a profound issue when I was mayor. Fentanyl, my God, we look back at the opium, at heroin as being the good old days. We could deal with heroin, but this fentanyl, it's a tough one to deal with. So the mayor's got a lot of issues on her plate, including dealing with the after effects of the pandemic. I think she's working real hard to address those issues, and I think we need to support her when she's doing the right thing, and challenge her and hold her accountable when we question a decision or an action she's taken.
You started.
Frankly, when I was mayor, I would welcome a group like this. A group of people that have come together with no mission other than let's involve people, let's engage people to make this city, a better place for us, our kids and our grandkids to live. How can anybody question that? And so that's what we're trying to do here. I've worked with cities around the world in my life of international development after being mayor, and I can see that the key to functioning, thriving, dynamic cities is the engagement of the citizens. And that's what we're attempting to do here. And the other thing which I think we can do, we talked a lot about advocacy, but we also can bring forth good ideas, good policy. The cities large and small across this country are facing the issues we are. Some cities are dealing with them better than we are. So let's see what's working out there, whether it's dealing with housing first policy or whether it's dealing with getting people on the road to recovery and breaking the addiction to fentanyl. What's working in other cities, and how can we take those practices and bring them to Burlington? I sometimes call it management by plagiarism. But if there's a good idea there, let's copy it and let's see if we can make it work here in Burlington.
Well, and the involvement of state government, I would argue, is pretty key, too. Do you think that state government, do you think Phil Scott understands this, is engaged in helping Burlington? Or is he saying this is your problem?
I think state government needs to do more. And I think that Phil Scott needs to provide stronger leadership in terms of he's got incredible political capital. He continues to be the most popular governor in this country. I'd love to see him take some of that political capital and use it to address some of the issues that towns and cities across the state of Vermont are facing, but including Burlington. Sometimes the old adage, which I've heard it as mayor, I heard it when I was running for governor in the past, is the nice thing about Burlington is it's so close to Vermont. Well, also the nice thing about Burlington, it's the economic engine for the state, and this economic engine requires fuel. So how do we put the fuel in this engine that's needed to address some of the issues and the challenges that we face? And I also think that we need to take some of the issues facing Burlington, whether it's mental health, whether it's drug addiction and treatment, whether it's homelessness. We need to be clear as who's responsible for addressing that issue, who's going to take the lead. And that's not clear in terms of addressing a lot of these issues. And so it gets stuffed down to the local level. And these are not functions, services that have traditionally been local government services. And local government needs some help in addressing these problems. And I think that's something that we can advocate for.
I think the point you made earlier, Michelle, and I think you made it too, Peter, is talking about how it may be a small number of people who are creating a large number of the problems and who frankly need a lot of help. And we're living at a different time. You know, we don't have a state hospital in Waterbury anymore. We have people that, for right or wrong, you know, are out on the streets. So how do you change that?
Yeah, good question. But when there's people that are repeat offenders, you need to hold them accountable. And how do you hold them accountable? Well, it might be restorative justice, where they come to understand the harm that they're inflicting on others and take actions which will remedy that. And if they're not prepared to do that, then maybe they need to spend some time in a facility, in a jail. You know, I talked to some folks that are dealing with the drug addiction issues, and they said, you know, sometimes for people to address the problems, they need to hit bottom. You know, I think we need to acknowledge that the road to recovery for some folks, I think, involves them being held accountable through the court system, the criminal justice system, for their actions.
You know, the same thing I would point out with a place like the library. I think is kind of a classic example of this tension between wanting to honor the fact that even people who are struggling have a right to be in the library.
Right.
And you've also got people that are not comfortable going to the library anymore.
Right.
So how would you, if you were still in office, how would you deal with that as a public policy leader?
I would deal with that by trying to make it clear that being addicted to drugs is not a crime. Having mental health issues and challenges is not a crime. Being homelessness is not a crime. What is a crime is when you're behaving in a way that's negatively affecting others, either individuals or institutions. It's a crime when you go into City Market and fill up a grocery cart with groceries and just head out the door and nobody can stop them. You know, and as a result, City Market, the cherished institution in this community that I had something bringing it, they're struggling today. And one of the reasons they're struggling
big time
is because of the retail theft that's occurring and because of the money that they need to spend in security. And so that's a good example. You know, we need to hold people accountable that are inflicting harm, in this case on City Market, or it might be on the individual, on the families that are trying to enjoy a peaceful night on Church Street, should not have to experience others shooting up in a public place. We can't allow that.
Okay, but use the City Market as an example. You know, you've got somebody who's stolen goods who runs out. There's not enough police officers, and I know store owners who say to their employees, don't confront that person. Don't go after them. You don't know what or who you're dealing with. This could be somebody who's on meth, and you could then be injured. So, you know, it's not the same crime that it used to be in the past.
It's not the same crime, but I think there needs to be a recognition that this is causing harm not only on individuals, and in this case, the institution of our cooperative grocery store, but also on the broader community. So we as a community need to come together and decide how we're going to address that issue and prevent that behavior.
Like how? I mean, what would you do differently than what's being done today?
There may need to be some changes in terms of how the court system is addressing those issues. There may need to be some changes in state law relative to retail theft. You know, I don't have all the solutions, but I'm smart enough to know that there are many stakeholders out there that, if brought together, and this is, again, I think a role that BBF can play, we can bring together the stakeholders and come up with a strategy, with a plan to address that problem.
And I would add, I think what, in my opinion, we're seeing when government's not doing their job, i.e., when we don't have enough police officers, when our elected officials don't support the police officers the way they need to, then individual organizations take on that expense. City Market has a security guard. King Street Youth Center had to hire a security guard. Why? Because the government's not taking care of is not fulfilling in the social contract that we have. I think whether it's federal, state, or local, governments create the infrastructure for a healthy society, right? They create the infrastructure so that businesses could thrive, people can get to and from work with roads and the necessary infrastructure. Well, part of that infrastructure is creating, having a healthy police department, a robust one that's well-trained and held accountable, and also having a state's attorney's office that's well-supported and with a philosophy of we need to hold people accountable. I mean, it's all about creating safety for folks, including, to Peter's point, people that are addicted to drugs. I know 3 families who kicked out their family member because they were not safe and not healthy to have in the home. That family member ends up on the street. We as a society really are, now it's in the bigger family of the community. It's not okay for you to be here. You're not behaving in a way that creates a safe environment. So that's where I think being held accountable and maybe spending some time in the prison system where we do have drug rehab. I know a lot of families that are like, please arrest my family member. It's the only hope. That is a hope for them to get off of drugs. So I think we just need to look at it a little differently and really say, what is compassion? Is it really compassionate to let somebody suffer and keep having to Narcan them over and over and over again? Because open drug use is illegal. I think we just have some hard questions that we need to address.
Okay, I'm feeling like I'm sounding a little repetitive here, but you've got a city government that holds community forums talking about public safety. It seems like a lot of people are engaged. The city has hired a public safety officer. There seems to be a lot of attention on this. I don't hear a lot of people saying to me, wow, Mark, things have really changed in the last year or two.
Well, I have heard things have changed with police presence on Church Street. That has shifted Church Street, but we still don't have enough police. The research tells us just by having a police officer in uniform, that shifts behavior. But I agree with you. We still have a big problem.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that Building Burlington's Future was created. Is I think we and the citizens of Burlington recognize that the status quo is not cutting for us. There's some issues that we need to better address. And so the way that you address them is not simply to say, well, local government will address it, but to say that we, the citizens, need to take control. We need to be more engaged. We need to be more involved. And we need to roll up our sleeves and address these problems. And that's one of the things that's really impressed me about this community is BBF has been well received by citizens that say, great, I've been looking for a way that I could get involved. I'm looking for something that I could do. I'm looking to have my voice heard. And if we can engage people and amplify their voice, I think that it's a worthwhile effort.
I still don't know what that means when you say that this is an opportunity for people to get involved, to roll up their sleeves. Those sound like a lot of cliches we hear an awful lot. And I guess I'm hoping to hear something more tangible. And I think not me, but I think a lot of people are hoping to hear something that's more tangible.
So I'll give you an example, Mark. Right now, if we made a statement, right? If we made a statement about, the crime happening in Burlington, that doesn't change anything. Okay? Everyone knows that. So what we're looking to do is to be for something, to be for change. Now, remember, we've been in organization for 8 weeks. What that for are things that we're talking about right now. So when there is an actionable item that we're going to be involved with, then we can use, right now we have about 4,000 people that have signed on to be part of our organization. Really, it's an advocacy organization, not membership. So they said, yes, I want to stay informed. I don't have to agree with everything you're doing, but I want to stay informed and make my own decision. Now, let's say there's a resolution in front of City Council. We actually will, again, taking a page out of Let's Grow Kids playbook, and we can talk about that, how effective they were at actually getting a payroll tax to shift a childcare system in Vermont. That was all done through activating voters to contact their lawmakers. Minus that, it never would have happened. Never. So it's about activating the voters to give the lawmakers the courage to do hard things when it's time to do hard things. Because if not, you usually have a small group of activists that show up, and those voices are the only ones amplified. Not the majority of Burlingtonians who maybe can't go to city council meetings. You know, they've got kids, they're working. So this gives folks a chance to have their voices heard in a timely manner. And I could talk, I think it would be boring for your listeners, I could talk about what that whole database and that advocacy software that we're using is, but it's very effective. It's used by Planned Parenthood. It was used by Let's Grow Kids. It's a sophisticated software to make it really easy for people to go directly to their city councilor.
Yeah, and Mark, some of your questions, I hear a tinge of cynicism in your question. And I think that's understandable. And I think what you've asked today is, who are you? Who is this organization building Burlington's future? Who's behind it? Well, we've had a chance to discuss that. Why do you exist? We've had a chance to discuss that. What have you done? As Michelle has said, ask us that a few months from now, 6 months from now. We need to say these are specific actions that we've taken. Right now, we're very much in startup phase. We're creating the systems, the platforms, the staffing, the networks, and by the end of the year, we need to have produced some results, or else folks that have supported this organization, I think that they'll share your cynicism.
Well, I will not. I'm not going to argue with you whether if you view what I'm saying as cynical or not. I think a lot of people share great, deep frustration. I think you folks do too, about how significantly this city has changed, and that's why I'm asking you those questions. And perhaps it's a tone of frustration more than cynicism. You know, I hear a lot of people talking about these same things, say, this is happening everywhere across the country. I think that's sometimes too easy an answer. It is. You know, it is happening everywhere across the country. But you know, I and everybody else who are my neighbors don't live everywhere else in the country.
Right.
And I think one of the issues that Burlington has that's more challenging than many other places. You go to San Francisco, there's sort of one part of San Francisco that is like this. You know, downtown Burlington is basically 4 by 5 blocks.
That's right.
So, you know, everybody is in this very small space.
Yeah. I think it's important to recognize that Burlington is not unique in facing challenges of homelessness, of drug addiction, of folks on the streets with mental illnesses. We're not unique. We need to look at other cities and learn from them. But we also need to acknowledge that there are trends, there are conditions in this city which we don't want to live with. And we share that frustration. And I think that's why this organization was created, is to give us folks that have a history of civic engagement a new opportunity to, rather than simply complain, to attempt to do something to address the issues and the challenges that we face, and a place where others can contribute and participate.
So I think one of the things that we really need to get real with is, you know, folks that live outside of Burlington might say, I'm not going to Burlington, you know, I don't feel safe there. When the reality is, when someone has an addiction issue or they lose their home, they're coming to Burlington. So these aren't Burlington residents that are causing all of this. This is folks from all around the state that land in the city that has the most resources to deal with the issues. The issue is we're over capacity. So I think that's a really important thing for Vermonters to understand. This is where people end up. So this is why we need state support and the state to help us figure this out. But I think what we're all seeing is this is now, because Burlington's exceeded our capacity to handle these issues, we're seeing them in other towns now. And so I think when we start to see this behavior and these problems in other cities and towns, we may get more state support to solve it as a state issue.
When your friends or neighbors say, yeah, I'm thinking about moving out of Burlington, what do you say to them?
Well, first, why?
What if they list all the reasons we've talked about?
Actually, I haven't had anybody say they're moving out of Burlington unless they're retiring and their house is too big for them. And if that's the case, we do need a lot of young families moving in. We do have an inventory issue. So that's another interesting thing. The state has an aging demographic, as does Burlington. So as things begin to shift, I'll be curious to see what happens to the city.
And frankly, in a city with a housing vacancy rate that hovers around 2%, I don't think the flight of individuals from Burlington is the problem. I do hear that sometimes. Folks from a variety of reasons are going to move from one community to another. But I think most of us appreciate what a spectacular place Burlington is. We also appreciate the fact that we've got some issues, we've got some challenges, and we need to work together to address them. And that's what being an engaged citizen is all about. Not running from those problems, but working to address them.
How do you get those people in Shelburne or South Burlington or wherever to get engaged with trying to come up with a solution to this or ideas to help this lessen this problem?
I think we're seeing some of those people engaged. I think we have many people that have stepped up and are supporting building Burlington's future that live out of town because they understand how important Burlington is to not only the economy of Vermont, but as an arts center, as the cultural center, as the entertainment center of this state. People understand that Burlington is important, and it's important not only for those of us that live in Burlington, but for other Vermonters as well.
Of the 4,000 people you mentioned have signed up, could you have any idea what the breakdown is in terms of who lives in Burlington and who doesn't live in Burlington?
Yeah, it's about 75% of people that live in Burlington. The other 25% are around Chittenden County.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess maybe that's encouraging. How long do you think Burlington has to turn this around? Not solve it, but to turn the curve on this before you can't turn it around.
I would be optimistic and look at the glass as half full, and I would say I think things are getting better. I haven't solved the problems, but there's some indicators just from my own perception of life in Burlington that suggests that that we're addressing this issue, that changes are being made in terms of whether it's the staffing of the police department or the introduction of new programs to address these issues. So, but I do think, though, that we need to see more action, and it needs to be sooner than later.
I don't think I could put a time frame on it. But, if we look at the construction, there's a beginning, middle, and end to that. That will help a lot. And as far as the other issues that we've talked about are all around community safety, I think Burlington residents are starting to understand what we need. So I say it's going to look like a very different place in 5 years. But I don't think we have any certain time frame to turn it around or else. I think we're just going to continue to, once Burlingtonians decide we have a problem we need to fix, I've been here for 30 years, I believe we're going to do it.
I can remember growing up when people talked about New York City, it was over. Right. There was just a story the other day in the papers talking about the revitalization of Detroit. Right. I think, you read that and you say, okay. So, maybe this is just, cities go up and cities go down, and maybe this is just one of those periods where we'll look back on and it's a low point.
Yeah.
Well, and remember, we have the south end of Burlington. It's still Burlington. That's actually got a lot of really amazing things going on. So I think we're going to see different areas of the city develop, grow, become more livable, and downtown at the same time will work on it. So I do see a lot of really good things happening in the city.
That wraps it up for this edition of 802 News, sponsored by Red Hen Baking Company. Thanks for listening.